Hi, my name is Michaela Petz, and this is my Chapter 4 takeaways. This chapter's title was Verbal Communication. It was all about how we verbally communicate and the meaning of language. I found it very interesting reading about how every 2 weeks a rare language dies. My stepmom's mom, the first time I met her, started speaking in a different language. They are from the Philippines and they speak Tagalog. And I had never heard the language before. And you don't think about how many different languages there are in the world and how often some of them, quote, die. Another thing in this chapter was language is symbolic. Everybody uses a language. There's cognitive language, the systems of symbols in the way you describe things, but the language in your head is not always shared by those around you. Just because you're thinking one thing does not mean the person next to you could be thinking the same thing. Another thing in this chapter was grammar and pronunciation. We learned these things back in elementary school, but we still use them to this day. Even part of our speech criteria is pronunciation, making sure we pronunciate the words. In this chapter, they also spoke about learning different languages. I am currently taking a Spanish class in college, and having to adjust to speaking a different language in their roles, feminine to masculine, is very difficult. Also in this chapter, I learned the 5 competencies for how language behaviors function. There's controlling, informing, feeling, imagining, and ritualizing. Control is you exert your control or influence over others and our environment. Informing, to give and receive information, questioning, describing, reinforcing, and withholding. Feeling, which is primarily relational. We use language to express our feelings, but we do not all communicate our emotions well. Imagining, a complex functional competency, ability to think, play, and be creative. We learn this as children. Make-believe, playing with our dolls. Ritualizing, which involved in enacting the rules for what we are supposed to say in routine situations. Thank you, please, things we learned growing up. It was also interesting, words have multiple meanings, and that we need to be careful and truly think about how we're using the words and where we are when we say them. When they're appropriate to use, you wouldn't say the same thing at dinner with friends, in a work meeting. I also really enjoyed the abstraction ladder. The top was very vague information and the bottom was very grainy, specific information. Speaking of abstraction, the abstract languages, evasion, equivocation, and euphemisms were also very interesting to read about. In part of the chapter, it stated, words can be really hard to forget. This reminds me of a saying that my dad used to say. Think of talking like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. Once the toothpaste is out, you can't put it back in. Much like languages and communicating, once you say something, you can't take it back. Unfortunately, some of the things that we see way too often in the world today is hate speech and hurtful language. I wish we didn't see it as often, but you look in social media, you're going to see some kind of hate language or hateful speech. Labeling. The labels we choose for people reflect on how we feel about those people. So it's something to be considerate about when we're putting a label on somebody. Another interesting thing I learned about is profanity. We're all adults. We all use it. We think it's funny when children say it, but you gotta know when it's okay and when it is not. Another thing I learned was high language and low language. High language is more formal and polite, something that you would use at work. Low language is slang and casual, something you would use more with your friends. Adapting to your situation is very key. Where you are, who you're with, is going to determine what kind of language you're speaking or how you are speaking. The slang / geography part reminded me of the word wicked. I'm from Boston and they use this word as awesome or awful, really to explain any situation. But down here in the South, when I first moved down here, they had no idea what I was talking about when I said that. So it kind of was a good little memory of reading this chapter. Language, I don't think should be compared based on gender. There are so many different factors that it can affect our communication that are just not based on gender. Because even the same gender can have different ways of communicating. Mediated context. I have definitely sent and received text or emails and not understood the context or the tone of the message. Emojis have been a huge help. If someone says something and then sends a smiley face, you're going to assume based on the emoji that they are happy. Or if they send a mad face, you're going to assume that they're mad. It's been very helpful, but texts and emails can be taken the wrong way, not knowing their tone.